Hi friends, welcome back to Iron Crane Dojo, and Bill McCabe here, and we're going to revisit the cane today. We sort of digressed for a week or two. We went on to some different topics, but we're going to return to the cane and continue our presentation of some of the ways that we approach cane work. And just cutting to the quick here, I want you to get an idea about certain types of flows that are essential to cane movement that just have to be ingrained over time into your body so that these moves flow instinctively from within you in self-defense situations. And I'm going to have Terry come out here and just sort of stand as a target demonstrator. The first thing I want you to be sensitive to is what's called the 5-strike pattern. And the 5-strike pattern is both in the knife arts and in the sword arts. It's in Arnis, and it has different names in different cultures. I saw it in Thailand, and I'm also aware that versions of it exist in Europe and European type sword fighting. Some people call it cinco tiros. I just refer to it as 5-strike pattern. Traditionally, the 5-strike, let's project it this way, so you can see the angles here. Okay. Traditionally, the 5-strike pattern would be a diagonal cut, and a diagonal cut downward, followed by a diagonal cut upward, diagonal cut upward, and either a thrust or a vertical cut or a stepping thrust. Okay, so for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, again, or 5, or 5, or you can go off angle and 5, or off angle and 5. All those are within the realm of what's practical. I'm going to show you two versions or two families of 5-strike patterns, and then over time you'll experiment under the guidance of a qualified instructor with how these can vary and mutate into different sequences, but it always breaks down to these, in the end, into these 5-strike patterns. This will be the first family with the diagonal cuts. And the first family, of course, relates to blade fighting, so you can see the diagonal cuts with bladed weapons are going through vital target areas. Without blades, they're still hitting sensitive areas. You sort of see how the joints are exposed for these types of strikes as you're moving at the angles. And the thrust, vulnerable targets, whichever one you choose. So the first family involves the diagonal cuts. The second family of 5-strike patterns involves the horizontal cuts. And it sort of sets up the same way timing-wise, but the angles of attack and approach differ significantly. So, first hit, second hit, third hit, fourth hit, and the finishing strike will be basically the same. Okay. First hit, second hit, third hit, fourth hit, fifth hit. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. And again, the fifth could be any of these alternatives. As you do this, I want you to get a little idea of ways that you can augment the efficiency of your strike. So, in either of these sequences, I'm not holding the weapon or the cane rigid. It's not like I'm swinging a baseball bat, you know, a baseball bat with one hand. It's not that at all. It's extremely loose in my hand, and it's just whipping So like whenever I'm cutting from outside to inside, if you watch my hand, it's whipping in my hand like this. Grab me a short stick if you will. And the whipping action comes here. I'm actually accelerating it all the way into the strike. So it's whipping. And you've got to get that. If you're locking it in your wrist coming across like this, you're working against yourself the whole way. It's like your wrist becomes a brake. So the whipping action would look like this. I'm showing you with the shorter stick so you get an idea of how it looks. The whip, here, and it's actually snapping as you make the contact. And you can sort of see that motion. And if you watch the can when I do it, I let it float here. So it's actually adopting a position like this, and then it whips across. You want that, if you will? Come a little closer, sir. So I'm here, and as I come across, I whip. And then I actually whip back. When it cuts from the outside to the inside, it's the body, arm, and my right leg driving it through. If you look at my right leg, you can see it driving through. And when I come back, it's my body uncorking, springing it through. Now I want you to watch on the return stroke as it cuts across here. See it? It's almost as though I'm bouncing off my body. Sometimes I do bounce off my body, but even if I don't, the energy dynamic is such that there's like an implied bounce, and that implied bounce accelerates the counter of the cross strike coming back. So I come across, watch. See, no contact. See it? And what happens is my shoulder, my arm, and my wrist whip in the other direction, and there's like an implied bounce there at the end. And that's the subtle dynamic that you're trying to master as you do all this. So when you're cutting across, same dynamic if I'm doing the diagonal cut and going up. Coming across, coming down. Same dynamic. Diagonal, 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 diagonal. You need to build that into your system of movement so that you have great power with all of your hits. The other thing is a circular rotation over the top, which you can integrate into the flow of your movement virtually any place that you want to do it. But you have to build this into your flow over time. And the move would be like this. And you would just basically practice it slow and deliberately in the beginning. So anytime you strike across, if you need to do a quick second strike, you would float it over your head and just come down and do it. Or float it over the top. Float it over the top. And you can do the same thing this way too. So you come around, over the top, without hitting the lights. My favorite message today. Cutting across, around, cutting across, around, cutting across, around, cutting across, and around. And you need to build that into what you do. Now, having said that, we're going to take an entirely different perspective on the application of the 5 strikes. I have the 3 of you, if you grab a weapon, I'll take this to present to you.
Can I stand over here for the glare? Would that be okay?
Okay. Good. And here's what you have to do next. After you get this 5-strike flow down, you have to learn how to exploit the 5 strikes in multiple directions against multiple attackers. It's not just you hitting one person 5 strikes all the time. You're perfecting this 5-strike concept so that you have movement in 3 dimensions. So if you split around them into a triangle, now the object here is as I hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or break angle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just being able to break angle at any time that you choose and go into a completely different direction. That's something you need to perfect just by experimentation, and it comes pretty quick. Somebody asked me today, as a matter of fact, like, what's the efficacy of the 5 strikes, you know, when you're hitting people like that in a quick flow? And the reason why you practice this whole 5-strike concept is because in a general situation, say I'm just using 1 strike to hit 3 people, I hit here. That's a glancing strike. It's more of a distraction strike than a strike that's going to take a person down. 2nd strike, same thing. Not one that will necessarily take a person down. But what's happening is all the while that I'm doing these strikes, I'm looking for the 1 strike that will finish off the person and will take the person down. And that's the reason why you want to master the 5-strike pattern, so that you develop this, a lot of distracting noise out here today. You want to master the 5-strike pattern so that you learn to think while you're moving, and even while you're doing these defensive strikes, you're still able to find the strike that will tilt the balance of the fight into your favor. Now, one other thing about the 5 strikes, you two will stick out of it for a second, and Terry, come in here. Is even though we call them 5 strikes, the 5 strikes are not necessarily 5 strikes all the time. So, for example, if I'm doing this pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Terry throws an attack at me. I hit. That's the 1st strike. 2, 3, she throws another attack at me. 4, 5. So some of the moves that you're thinking of as strikes can be used as defensive moves, with the follow-up strike being a counter. So you need to be aware of that also. And something else I want to say about it. It slips my mind at the moment, so maybe I'll add it on later on. You want to no, let's go ahead and end it at that point. Just take those, these are just basic building blocks. Take those, do with them what you will under the guidance of your instructor. It may add something to what your thinking is and your efficiency is, and if so, let me hear from you. Take care.